Hello and welcome to Chronicles of Tao by Deng Ming Dao, Taoist Master. This chapter is about war, the Sino-Japanese War, the Japanese occupation of China in 1937, and these warriors, warrior monks, are travelling. They're becoming basically Sai Hung, who is a warrior monk, is becoming a soldier. So temporarily, we'll find out. But it's an interesting transition because this is what the Taoists have to say about war. So as usual, I'll just go through the bits that I've underlined, the phrases, because these are the most important parts. If you want to read the story in chronological order, then I advise you to read this amazing book. I know it appears in reverse, but this is Chronicles of Tao by Deng Ming Dao. It's one of the greatest books that I've ever read. A large number of Taoists advocated non-involvement in the war. They insisted that they, as people who had left their families, should not return to worldly affairs and break the purity they had so long cultivated. The world was a place of war, deceit, honesty, money, killing, politics, and danger. They did not want to break their ascetic commitments. The patriotic Taoists disagreed, saying that if China was overrun or destroyed, ascetics would have no place to practice their arts. Moved by indignation and righteousness, these people urged some involvement. Renunciates or not, they were needed by their country and people. Controversy split the community until the Grand Master called the public assembly. All the priests and students from Huashan's 5 peaks came in steady streams. Many engaged in heated discussions as they crowded anxiously into the courtyards of the South Peak Temple to await the Grand Master's instruction. So he comes forth. We are Taoist renunciates. We have all left the world and should remain unconcerned with the insignificant and petty squabbles of small-minded men. Entering the world again is to forsake the purity we have cultivated on this holy mountain. It is impossible to be in the world and remain untainted. Yet, we are also Chinese. A foreign power is invading our country, and every person must do his part in defending it. There is more to life than spirituality. Aiding the war effort need not mean fighting. Each man must contribute in his own way. Each man must ask himself how he can best help China. Some may go down and feed the people. Some should give medical aid, and some should properly preserve the ancient traditions for the future. Even if you will not kill, you can still contribute. For those of you trained in the martial traditions, you must defend in that way. You are warriors, and the business of a warrior is war. The Grand Master continued his speech, but Sai Hung's mind was already racing. He was young and outraged. He wanted to defend his people and homeland. He wanted to seek revenge for the atrocities committed against helpless people. He wanted to fight. So that evening, Sai Hung and the 2 acolytes go and discuss, the moral, ethical implications of fighting, because as monks and priests and warriors, well, especially the monks and priests, had taken a vow, a renunciate's vow not to kill, not to generate new karma that could hinder your spiritual evolution. So you might have to come back because you've killed. But nonetheless, if they choose to sit back and do nothing, and they don't fight, the Japanese could take over and their way of life could be completely over. They would become enslaved. Like that's what happened to Ip Man, the Chinese martial arts master who brought Wing Chun to China and eventually to the Western world through him. And he was wealthy, grown up. He was wealthy, had all the privileges of nice things, good material existence. But when the Japanese came, he became poor because it was all destroyed, it was all taken away. So he had to fight the same way, even though he himself had a spiritual inclination. We are martial artists, we fight, said Sound of Clear Water. When I think of the inhuman acts forced upon women, children and the elderly, I cannot contain myself. I cannot stand by. I shall kill. And I too, said Simon. They turned to mist through a grove. He said nothing, but returned their look steadily. He had not argued. They knew he would go. It is impossible to fight and be in the sect, continued Sihun. It will be impossible to keep the precepts on the battlefield. I shall be entangled in the world. I am leaving the sect. Sihun, said Miss Trua Grove, you mustn't abandon your path. I'll become a wandering Taoist, unaffiliated with a temple. Look, sometimes I can't stand it up here. I never have enough to eat. And training 7 days a week can be depressing. Every day it's wake up and recite sutras. You could blame him, huh? Eat breakfast, recite sutras. Eat lunch, recite sutras. Eat dinner, recite sutras. Go to sleep, recite sutras. I tell you, I'd rather be a lone ascetic. You took your vows, Sound and Clear Water reminded him. I know. I remain a Taoist. But even if I could recite sutras on the battleground, it would be hypocritical. I'll be scheming, fighting for my life, eating meat, thinking evil, killing. How can I honour the precepts? I need all my energy and strength to concentrate on fighting. The two acolytes glanced at each other. Do as you like, Sihun, said Miss Trua Grove, but I shall try to keep the precepts. I shall as well, said Sound of Clear Water. How can you? Asked Sihun hotly. You'll be killing. Don't the priests say that those who kill shall be punished in hell? They say, stressed Sound of Clear Water, that to kill another human being is a sin. Which human beings commit those atrocities? Besides, Sihun, added Miss Trua Grove, we must fight evil and defend ourselves. We do not kill for pleasure. But we've all fought bandits and animals who have attacked us on the mountain. Even holy men must defend themselves. We have been attacked without provocation. It is our right to defend ourselves. The next day Sihun went to see his master. He was dressed not in his robes, but in black martial artist clothing bound at the wrists and ankles. He bowed and requested permission to enter. The Grand Master nodded a silent acknowledgement. I'm leaving the mountain, said Sihun. The Grand Master's eyes narrowed. Before he could reply, Sihun swiftly added, and I'm leaving the sect. The Grand Master slammed his palm loudly to the desk. He glared angrily at him. It was the first time Sihun had seen his master angry. He was surprised. You and your saucy mouth. Think, don't speak carelessly with me. I cannot keep the precepts on the battlefield. Who says you're going? Where did you get such impudent ideas? You're not to run around following your ridiculous whims. You're supposed to follow your training. But I must fight. If I fight, I must eat. The precepts must be observed. You say the body is the temple of the gods, said Simon defiantly. Am I to fight without nourishment? What will happen to the temple then? The body must be nourished. The gods won't remain in an ill-repaired temple. You are filled with unwholesome ideas. The mind is not allowed to be independent. We are no better than vegetables. The Grand Master stood up and fixed Sai Hung with a stern look. You're young and know no better. A little learning and you're ready to tell the world what to do. Think carefully before you take this irresponsible plunge. I am becoming a wandering Taoist, replied Sai Hung steadily. I won't be tied to a temple. If you leave, said the Master sharply, don't come back. Sai Hung was stunned, but there was nothing more to be said. Dashi, I am leaving. The Grand Master sat down and simply waved him away in dismissal. So he goes and becomes a soldier. Sai Hung's primary weapons were a single-edged sabre and spear. He dressed completely in black cotton clothes tied at the wrists and ankles, walked on straw sandals, and coiled his braided hair beneath a black cloth wrapping. He was a fiery and idealistic soldier, as energetic but as temperamental as a stallion. He specialized in isolating attacks, picking off men one by one, attacking at dawn, twilight, or even in broad daylight. Sai Hung hid in tall grass and became expert at killing passing soldiers. He pierced throats with his spear so that his victims died soundlessly. Serious stuff, eh? In close-range fighting, he favoured the sabre. Sai Hung lured enemy soldiers close to himself so that they were forced to depend on bayonets and knives rather than on bullets. In that situation, Sai Hung's heavy sabre, honed by blades in the scabbard, each time it was drawn, was a superior weapon. With whirling motions and mighty leaps, Sai Hung parried with ease, using the momentum to sever limbs in single swings. He remembered the philosophy of his sabre's instructors about piercing, slashing, parrying and hacking. A shallow cut is used to torture a victim. Decapitation is merciful. Sai Hung released all the power of his youth and training in hand combat. His palms were devastating. His kicks had an iron hardness. His meridians were opened, his internal energy was conserved by celibacy, and his techniques were forged by his Spartan training. He was a wild fighter. It became easy for him to dispatch a man with a single strike, or break a neck with a simple twist. His idealism slowly wore away in the climate of warfare, and Sai Hung found himself motivated by something new: hatred. The intellect grew dumb on the battlefield, and compassion was lost in the stark contrasts of wartime realities. He had learned many things in Fashan, but it was not until he saw enemy atrocities with his own eyes that he learned to hate men. Whenever he entered villages abandoned by the enemy, he saw bloody testimonials to human depravity. Torn bodies left mute histories of raped women, whipped flesh, bayoneted babies, mutilated boys, staked and burned genitals. The horror became so redundant that his eyes grew weary. But for his heart and will, the repetition was a constant refueling of a fire that forged hatred in him and sharpened it to a razor's edge. The war atrocities seared his companions' souls of all sensitivity. They fought firmly and stoically. Not so with Saihumi. He lived from day to day, powered by a flickering alternation between commitment to his cause and pure madness. Battle after battle shook his psyche. He was wounded and scarred in body and mind by sound that always seemed like questions. They haunted him. The ominous thuds of exploding bombs, the mad percussion of machine gun fire, even the whisper of flesh parted from flesh as his blade made its absolute division became familiar. But it was when human sound reached him, the anonymous whimper of a frightened child, the scream of a dying comrade, the last moan of his enemy, that he felt the sound address his soul directly. He yearned for these rare moments when the battlefield was quiet. In those fleeting moments the sounds of warfare that all asked the question, why, faded. But he then took up the refrain within himself. During lulls in the cacophony of destruction he tried to sort out his own thoughts and resolve the apparent monstrous dichotomy between Taoism and the war. So he's comparing the purity of the mountain Huashan to the madness and murder and mayhem of the battlefield, saying that Huashan seemed like heaven compared to the filth and degradation of the battlefield, where both the mountain and heaven seemed distant and inaccessible. Now Saihung lived a wretched life of anger, killing and intrigue. He had to steal his food, eating whatever he could scrounge and pour his intelligence into setting traps. He had to put his spirituality completely aside in order to throw the totality of his being into slaughtering other men. The old Taoists were right. It was impossible to live in the world without being entangled. But for the time being he was fully entangled. Each time he saw the mounds of rotten flesh that were feasts for the dogs and crows, his passion welled up for revenge. Battle cries drowned out the whispers of scriptures. Fury pushed aside morality. He had to fight to save his people. Since childhood he had been told that to kill was to incur eternal damnation. He accepted it. He would go to hell with no regrets. At times his thoughts of Huashan became bitter and cynical. If the Taoists were so great, why didn't they stop the war? But each time he could also answer himself in the words he had so often heard. The Taoists were renunciates. The world was not real. The world did not matter. But weren't they men? Weren't they Chinese? Couldn't they stop the senseless assaults with their extraordinary powers? He realised soberly that even if they could, they wouldn't. Every person had his destiny. Everyone had to choose between good and evil, and humanity had to find its own way from savagery to divinity. War was destiny, and destiny was inescapable even for the gods. Spirituality offered no obvious way out. The renunciates remained on the mountain, others struggled on the plains, but spirituality was only human aspiration crystallized. It could not work miracles. The Taoists, Simon realized sadly, are only men, after all. It's like what Don Juan says, the warriors realizing that beyond anything else, they were men. Ordinary human beings. It was true that they had turned their backs on the self-destructive and self-indulgent tragedies most people called their lives. A person in the Taoist path sought his own liberation, secured it, and tried to help others all he could to gain their liberation too. But humanity was composed of individuals, each one born with the same free will and opportunity of choice between sacrificing for higher consciousness or plunging towards degradation. That was a human task. That was human meaning, individualized. If there were no evil, there would be no consequence, and thus no choice. Humanity always had a choice, and ultimately one's freedom could be attained only by one's persistent conscious effort. The Taoists could not rescue all of a nation or the whole planet. That would have been an act of grace. Divine intervention of that sort was beyond the power of even the Jade Emperor himself. Sai Hun's contemplations gave him perspective. He thought of reincarnation. Human life was a halfway point between upper and lower states of consciousness. Humanity had not yet resolved this dilemma. In its evolutionary progression, the war as activity during a moment of this evolution suddenly seemed petty and insignificant. But these philosophical flights were taking place on a battlefield. He was here. Death surrounded him. The dichotomy and the dilemma could not be resolved. He had to go on now. He didn't want to die. He didn't want to be killed. Despite his introspection into moral considerations, he formulated a simple conclusion. He would kill anyone who tried to kill him. Only then could he succeed in his present task. So, as far as the reading goes, we'll leave it there because these are powerful ethical considerations for anybody on the spiritual path, of those who follow a Taoist or Buddhist philosophy or Hindu teaching, the idea of the reincarnation of the soul and the transmigration of souls. And so that if we generate negative karma, it's not that then we'll be reborn in a less evolved state, and then we'll have to go through all these experiences, trials and tribulations in order to evolve out of this limited sphere, this limited range of perception and awareness, a constricted view of the world in reality, not the whole, not the totality, not the Tao. And so Sai Hun, as a monk, as a warrior monk, had to experience this profound moral dilemma. Because if he killed, and he did kill, he would be generating negative karma. Not because there's an absolute good and evil. Objectively, there's only action and consequence. And some actions generate suffering, negative karma. If you don't sleep enough, if you eat a bad diet, if you drink too much alcohol, take too many drugs or the wrong type of drugs, mix with the wrong people, do bad deeds, you'll soon see the effects. You'll soon, if you live to see it, of course, you'll see how these things cloud and distort awareness and bring you closer to darkness. Conversely, how I don't like to use the word positive and negative really, but we are operating in the world of duality, so let's just say that actions that generate good karma, healthy diet, temperance, moderation, cultivation, present moment awareness, being present, receptive to the Tao, fluid in the abstract, the cultivated mind. Accessing higher realms of consciousness, then Your awareness will expand, it will deepen, it will widen, it will broaden. You'll gain a more holistic, totalistic understanding. And so these positive actions reap uh, beneficial results. The Buddhists call it merit. Meritorious actions generate positive karma. So killing is said to generate the worst possible karma. But nonetheless, the country was being invaded. He felt it was his duty. He felt it was part of his destiny. But his destiny was also to become a monk, not to kill. So there was these sharp divisions. There was this dichotomy that had to be dissolved. And he worked out that he would only try to kill someone who tried to kill him first. And I think that's a moral conundrum well solved. I think that's something that one could live with. I could live with that. I wouldn't intentionally kill, but if somebody tried to kill me first, then I don't see how I'm wrong in taking a life if I'm defending my own life because of this other person's negative intention. Doesn't mean that it's right. It doesn't mean that it doesn't generate some kind of karma. But I think the negative consequences are ameliorated by the peculiarity of these particular circumstances. So there is a time when killing is necessary, even as a Taoist, even as a spiritual practitioner. You must always remember the relativity of opposites, of yin and yang, good and evil, rich and poor. One couldn't exist without its opposite. And opposites only really exist in the world of duality, in oneness, unity, they come together. They're no longer opposites, really. We've transcended duality at this point. This is another matter. Until then, the dualistic world exists, and we have to work out these things as individual fractioned units of perception. So, this is something to really get our teeth into. What is good and evil? Is it ever appropriate to kill, to fight? Do people ask these sort of questions? Why not? These are important ethical and philosophical questions to address. It helps us gain understanding of life in its totality. So, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now.